Good evening, everyone. Gabs here. What's in the glass? Digital Base Streams. Welcome, everyone. I hope you're well. I hope you're keeping active. I hope you're keeping safe in these very unusual times. I'm trying to don't use unprecedented because some people said I'm using it too many times. So I'm stay away from it, but definitely very, very unusual times. If we haven't managed to meet yet, my name is Gabriele. I'm been creating the What's in the Glass universe since the beginning of the first lockdown. I was looking for a way to keep active, stay connected, mostly with the beer world, which I'm proudly part of, and all the rest of the people as well. I'm sure there are a lot of people out there that like to hear more about different cultures and where the products that they love are coming from, who are the people behind them, and that's what we're trying to do. We aim to build a digital community, which is putting connection dots all around people that are making the beer, people that are selling the beer, people that are talking and writing about the beer. We're all important. We're all making a difference, especially in these very, very unusual times. And we've been working on different projects to making sure we are doing this in the best way possible. One of them has been the Digital Beer Stream, the show that you're actually watching right now. Used to be on Instagram, is now on YouTube and on Facebook. I hope you in both of these, platforms. And we also work on a different project, which is called Turning the Tide. You can see the T-shirt in here. And Turning the Tide is our declaration for London pubs. And we've been going around and asking a few people what is going on and when there were, the time between the first and the second lockdown, so back in the summer. So you're going to see very soon what's about, but this is not the platform to talk about that. You can find everything on whatsintheglass.co.uk. For today, because we're not just talking about wheat pubs, today we are going to meet some of the legends of good beer in London. I'm saying legends because, when you're talking about a brewery established in 2010, and Andy will tell me if it's the right date later on, there are, few breweries that can actually say they were there at that time. And I always loved the beers that Redemption Brewing Co, the brewery that we're having today, have made in these years. I remember working for Mother Kelly's in Bethnal Green, and Nigel was saying to me, "Do you have Big Chief on draft?" I say, "Yep." It was like brilliant. You're also going to be lucky to find Big Chief both in cask in the Queen's Heads and in keg in the Bethnal Green. And I remember it was a pretty special time because we were suggesting a lot of that beer to most of the customers that were looking for, English style IPA. And I would love to introduce the guest for today. So please welcome Andy to the stream. Hello, Andy.
Hi, Gabs. Thanks for having me on.
My pleasure. As I said, I'm a big fan of your beer and your brewery for sure.
Thank you.
And double checking with you, is it 2010 the right date?
Cool. Spot on. First brew was 5th of January 2010. So yeah, spot on, Gabs.
Wow. So you've been celebrating, your 11th anniversary not far ago, basically.
Yeah, I mean, last year we had big plans to do stuff for our 10th birthday, 10 beers for 10 years, and have a big summer party and a lot of kind of celebrations and a few collaborations. And of course, it just it wasn't to be. So we're going to try and hopefully push them back. And once we can properly reopen, try and celebrate our 10th anniversary a year late.
I can't even think how many friends you made in all of this time making good beer and working with great pubs, right?
Yeah, I mean, it's been a kind of a real massive change. If you think back to 2010, the beer landscape in London was very different. The pubs were very different. I mean, there's so many pubs there now that were not around back then. And, the choice of beer available now is just so much greater. When we started, it was very difficult to get into a pub if you weren't on cask. Keg lines were very much tied up by the macros, and actually there wasn't a lot of independent keg beer on in many of the pubs. And of course that started to change, and new pubs opened. Plenty of pubs closed, of course, but lots of new pubs came in, opened with a completely different offering, and local became much more important within London, which has been great.
100%. And we all have bubbles of craft beer all around the city right now. So you can find decent beers in every direction, in every postcode.
Yeah.
But I'm always been curious. At that time, where was good beer? Where you were able to find decent good beer and decent good pubs with this good beer?
Back in those days, I mean, one of the classics was always the Wenlock Arms, which was very much a camera pub. They were, had a number of different kind of real ales on, and then the Old Fountain as well was doing a lot of good stuff back then as well. And of course, a lot of people will remember the King William IV, the Brodie's pub up in Leytonstone, which was which was doing all the Brodie's beers, and that was, they used to do their Bunny Basher every year as well, the festival where they have loads and loads of beers. So that was certainly kind of where the pubs that were doing stuff. And obviously people were going to the Colonel Tap Room back then. And then places like the Harp and Cask in Pimlico as well. Just prior to when Craft Beer Co started, Cask was kind of the first pub in that group doing stuff. So there were plenty of pubs, but the focus was probably more on real ale as opposed to a lot of kind of the craft kind of keg that probably dominates the London landscape now. Definitely.
And when I'm trying to explain what is the beer culture in London and in the UK, outside the UK, potentially friends in Italy or in Spain, or even like in a bit more like mainland Europe, could be France or even Belgium, I'm always trying to explain to them that in my opinion, there are like three different cultures. One is a bit more traditional. One is a bit more, futuristic, which is the craft. And then there is the mainstream. Now, for me, Redemption, which I will give you the chance to tell a bit more in a second, had always represented the right, a point in between more traditional way to understand beer, and at the same time, massively craft in the attitude. Yeah. Do you agree with that?
Yeah, I definitely agree. And I'd say, kind of, there's been quite a few breweries even around before us, probably likes of Fine Ales, for example, up in Scotland, who kind of had been doing that same kind of thing. At the time, we had always been big fans of Dark Star before we started. And that was, again, I think, a very similar type of brewery that was doing a lot of, really good, great beer. But it was still kind of very much aimed at that kind of sessionable pub market. And if you're brewing beer for pubs, then obviously it needs to be to some degree quite sessionable, because that's what the drinkers, particularly in cask, and what the pubs need. So I think we kind of straddle those two worlds to some degree. Thornbridge do it very, very, very well. I think again, they were a brewery that I looked up to massively. When we started. I think that's a very good way to describe us.
Because I came in 2012 in London, and for me it was just like a roller coaster. I had to learn rules. I had to learn, where to go, when to go, how to understand what people were drinking, so I could be able to ask bartender for definitely a good beer. And I know we are already being forward, and some people seems to know you quite well from the comments. But at the same time, if someone doesn't know Redemption, would you like to give them a very nice and description about what you're representing, guys?
Yeah, we've been very much about kind of focused on cask ale, although we do keg now as well. But our focus has tended to be very much sessionable beers, usually fairly hop forward but balanced in nature. So we've always been about kind of that balanced drinkability in beer, which is slightly kind of modern twist to it, if you like. But beers that are very much about drinkability, flavor, but beers that you want to go back and have another pint of. And that's probably the best way you can describe us. Our beers, you'll happily drink a pint of it. We're making kind of very challenging beers in that. We're making flavoursome beers that make the most of the ingredients we've been blessed with. and are designed really for people to drink in the pub socially. So I think when you're having a Redemption beer, it's not just about the beer, it's about kind of where you are in the pub, having a nice time. The beer helps lubricate that, but it's, you're probably not going to spend the evening kind of talking in detail about our beers. You're going to enjoy them and they're going to help the evening flow.
You'll be surprised how much we managed to speak about your beers with friends, and this is one of them for sure. Because amber ales, long porters, and bitters are the beers that are taking the biggest level of attention from people that are coming from London, but even outside London. For me, this is a pint of happiness, and I would love to cheers with you. Cheers, man.
Cheers, Gabs.
May I ask you what you're drinking as well?
I've got a kind of our Solar, which is our kind of American pale ale, so something kind of quite light and hoppy.
Lovely, that's good to hear. And before starting with a couple of questions more, there are someone asking about your accent.
So, from born in Glasgow. And then when I grew up, we kind of lived in America for a few years, back and forth between America and Glasgow. So we moved when I was 4, came back when I was 8, then moved again when I was 10, came back when I was 14. And then that was me in Glasgow until I moved down to London when I was, 21, 22. So generally kind of a Scottish American accent. I sometimes get called Irish and sometimes Dutch as well. So...
There are some reasons because people ask. There is curiosity around that. That's great.
Yeah.
Well, again, I love the fact that you mentioned all of these different cultures. Unlike some other breweries, but like some other ones in London, you have enough attention to all the elements of the beers. You're not just focus on hops. There is so much attention on malts as well, and this is brilliant. I put you on the same, breweries and have their attention than probably Partisan or Kernel as well in this city, right?
Yeah. They're all. I mean, and Andy at Partisan, he was our first brewer at Redemption as well. So, he has a very great palate, great understanding of all the ingredients that make a beer as well. Because I think a lot of the really great brewers out there, they manage to blend the ingredients together. Even if it's a really hop-forward beer, they still understand the importance of the malt, the yeast, and getting everything right. Because even really hop-forward beers, there's still quite a degree of balance in achieving that as well.
100%. Well, again, this is the magic. The cask for me is subtle flavors and aromas, and that's why the temperature. That's why the way that you keep the beer. You're making sure it's absolutely brilliant and fantastic. And there is a beautiful amount of people which are super how can I say passionate about the type of beers that you just mentioned right now. And I would love to hear, because I would love to speak with you about, history and different elements, but people want to hear a bit more like contemporary, let's say, news and what's going on in each of these breweries or bars, wherever we speak with. And there is a question that is something I'm asking constantly, and we'd love to ask the same to you. How has Redemption Brewing Company been impacted by this critical situation we are into now?
It's been very difficult for brewers like us that have very much relied on draft sales. Our beers are designed for the pubs. That's where we sell most of our beer to. The styles of beer we make go down best in the pub as well. So for us, the pubs not being open is a real difficult situation for us. I mean, we've managed to try and do more small pack. We have Hopspur and Big Chief in bottles, and then we've had Solar in cans, Trinity in cans, and Rhinelander's kind of newish lager for us in cans. So that's been great, and we've done a lot of mini kegs as well. So we've tried to kind of do mini kegs as a way of kind of trying to give people some kind of form of draft at home. But it still doesn't quite match the beauty of a pint of cask in the pub. So that's what we've been trying to do. What we found after the first lockdown are, when the pubs came back, all the restrictions, social distancing, made it a little bit difficult for pubs to have a lot of cask on, because they were scared they wouldn't be able to sell it in 3 days and the beer would start to go off. So actually, we found that for the first time, really, we were selling more keg than cask after the first lockdown. I'm hopeful that when we do open, when the pubs open back again, there'll be maybe a greater degree of certainty, and if we can start to see some light at the end of the tunnel in terms of some of the restrictions and social distancing, then hopefully cask will come back very, very strong. Because I know there's a lot of people that are desperate to go to the pub and have a proper pint of cask ale. And the beauty about cask ale, of course, is it's very difficult to replicate at home. You can't really. You can replicate great kind of craft keg beers at home with cans and bottles, but it's quite difficult to do that with cask ale. So we're just hoping that the pubs will open when the time is right, and that they'll be able to stay open, and we'll start to see the hospitality industry start to come back online and make people happy again. That's what they do.
That's what we're all looking forward to, because it has been too long, but I've seen new trends going on, different solutions than people are trying in these days. And I'm sure, Andy, you've been in some other similar digital online situations, occasions like this one, right?
Yeah, I've done a couple of things, but not a great deal, to be honest. Gabs, it's something we probably need to do. We probably need to be better at marketing than we are, really. It's probably a throwback to back in 2010 when you didn't need to worry too much about it, and of course you just kind of made the beer, and that's all you focused on doing. And one of the things, I think, the way the industry's changed over the last decade is that the marketing aspect, the branding aspect, has become much more important than it was before. Yeah. That's probably something where we need to up our game a little, I would say.
Well, even bottle shops, like I can't tell you how many there are right now in London, and I'm sure they are becoming almost like some mini brand ambassadors for every brewery that they rely into and they get the beer from. And we do have beautiful here around Finsbury Park, where I'm based, thinking about Clapton Craft, Indie Beer, and many more. And how did it go, the Offtrade, for you guys? Because I'm sure that has been a good relief business-wise in this period, right?
Well, we've never done a great deal with the Offtrade, really, because we've never had a big range of bottles and cans. So for us, it's tended to be, kind of a few small bottle shops, but never done a great deal with the bottle shops. I think probably, again, they've focused on some of the other breweries have a much wider range, and particularly in cans. We only started canning kind of 1.5 to 2 years ago. First, kind of saw back to consumer, and again, we'd be delighted to sell more beer to bottle shops. But one thing they've never been as keen on, for example, our Big Chief. It's a great example, as you said earlier, Gabs, of a kind of an English style IPA. It uses New Zealand hops, but it's very much in the tradition of an English style IPA in terms of it's quite balanced. And Hopspur obviously is essentially a kind of a amber best bitter, if you like. But that's not the kind of beer that's that popular in a lot of the bottle shops. Although Mitch, who I think I saw his name pop up earlier. He used to do the beer buying at Borough Wines, and he always said, and I remember he did a talk once at one of the events, and he said, kind of never underestimate the power of having a good kind of bitter, good best bitter in your bottle shop, because there will always be some people that will want to get that. And we sell to a place in Crouch End, a 12-ounce bottle shop, and they took some Hopspur from us, and at first it kind of sold quite slowly, and then suddenly a couple of people started buying it, and then kind of it all went within a week or two. So I think sometimes people are attracted to maybe more of the cans, particularly with the design work, and some of the more esoteric beers as well. But then when they get a chance to have something that's maybe a bit more familiar at times, they take some comfort in that and go back to it.
I'm trying to convince most of the friends that are lager drinkers and looking to come back on their lagers every time they're having something adventurous. And I'm trying to explain them along your lagers, try to introduce maybe bitters, amber ales, milds to your range, because when you're at home and you may be cooking something that, yes, could go well with a lager, but hey, how beautiful is going to be with one of these different beers, potentially a bitter or a brown ale as well. That is the real marriage. That for me is the way to convince consumers to be more adventurous.
Yes.
With the classics.
I agree. Yeah. And I mean, breweries like Colonel have been doing the classics for years as well, and they've just been done them brilliantly. So there's certainly are, I think, classics out there, and we've done a collaboration with Colonel a couple of times, a Victorian mild, and it's a great beer. It's and kind of a throwback to kind of when milds were brewed a little bit stronger as well, and again, very much kind of traditional in one sense. A classic beer, and we always manage to sell that very, very easily. There's always a great deal of demand for it.
Absolutely. Well, again, how do you think pubs, hospitality, beer in general has been supported by institutions in this period of time? Because I heard many different opinions, and most of them are pretty straightforward in what has been done properly and what not. There are lots of not out there, but hey, Andy, you have experience. You know what's good. You know what's possible. You know what's reasonable. What do you think overall?
I think I don't think there's been sufficient support for the hospitality industry as a whole, and as well, I think the suppliers in particular have also been left out considerably, because if you're a business like us, we're not hospitality, but we are very reliant on the health of the hospitality sector. And there's people worse off than us, people that are wedding suppliers, for example. But I think that the hospitality industry hasn't had the support they need, because I think what I've seen in central government in particular, I think. And I draw a distinction between local government and central government. I think local government has actually not done too bad a job. They're on the ground, they're probably speaking to businesses, and they themselves have got a real challenge trying to, provide the services they've got. But central government, I think, has really failed to understand the problems of small businesses. They're probably relying on kind of expensive, well-paid consultants to advise them, who have typically worked in large corporations, probably haven't had to be in a small business where they might be cleaning the toilet one day and doing something completely different the other day. So they don't necessarily understand the challenges that small businesses face. And, we've all got fixed costs as well, rent, insurance, all kinds of costs, finance repayments. And again, I think there's been a lack of support in terms of understanding those fixed costs. It's fine. Furlough's been great. It's allowed us to keep our team together. But there's still costs involved in terms of doing furlough for businesses. And then, the grants that have been given, we hadn't had anything, and that's difficult. And, many of the pubs haven't had enough as they've kind of been restricted from trading. And even when they opened, a lot of pubs, really, they were only opening to maintain those links with their community. They were still no doubt losing money. They were just opening to be able to say to them, we're still here, don't forget about us. And so the restrictions have just, anything above tier 1 really has just made it very difficult for hospitality to trade. The support's not been enough. And, I just hope that when we do open, enough places are able to open and get through. But we already know many examples of pubs that have closed, and I think one of the worries is, they may return as pubs, but what will happen? Will it be the larger pub groups, if you like, that maybe have resources, can more readily access the financial markets to borrow money to then buy some of those properties or those leases? Are we going to have a reduction in choice? Will some of the pubs that we know and love now, still be around? in a year's time, because even once they start trading again, there's going to be a lot of pressure on them in terms of repaying additional debt they've taken, and presumably social distancing may remain for some time as well. And of course, that again leads to an increasingly challenging environment for the pubs. So I think it's still going to be a difficult environment for the next while. And I think many pubs, many landlords have certainly kind of tried to hopefully look after their staff, look after their suppliers, and they'll be paying the price for that to some degree from doing their bit in the public interest for quite some time to come. And that that applies to everyone working in the beer industry, the supply side as well. I think as an industry, we've all done our bit. We've tried to, those pubs in particular that tried to change, set up a real safe operating environment. Some pubs spent a massive amount of money to do that, and really they've been let down badly, I think, by the government.
I keep saying that I don't want to live in a London where there are a couple of millions less people, which were part of what is making this city valuable. The people then decide to say, no, this is too much. I'm not going to pay this amount of rent for a city which it doesn't have anymore, the right pubs, the right places, and the right occasions out there. But it seems that despite the fact there are groups, there are associations, there are consumer associations that are screaming out there saying we are in danger, our sector is in danger. It's not enough. It's not good enough, strong enough. And I'm thinking, what would be the right, let's say, what we should do to making sure going forwards from now to the next months until we may going to be able to restart again and thrive again. What are the 3-4 steps that you recommend we must follow and we must do? And this is the question.
I think one of the important things that we've seen in the hospitality industry has been the chain in hospitality. They've all tried to help each other, whether it be suppliers giving pubs, kind of much greater credit, understanding that they're in a difficult position. So, look, there's no rush to repay us because we understand you're in a difficult position. And likewise, the suppliers into us being, again, generous in their credit, saying we understand it's difficult. So, everyone has been quite generous, I think, in their understanding of the problem in the chain. And I think that's been critical. And I think that's the step that we'll need to kind of continue to appreciate and understand, work together, understand the role we play in the chain. We're all reliant upon each other. As I said earlier, we need pubs and pubs need us, and we need our suppliers and they need us. And if we all work together and understand that, some of us, there might be times when we're that little bit stronger, so we can give a bit more support to those further down the chain. Might be times when they're a bit stronger, so when the pubs open, hopefully they'll have a lot of cash coming in, so they'll be in a better position. That'll be helpful to us because at that point, maybe, we'll have made the beer. We might be in a little bit of a more difficult position. And likewise for the wholesalers, there's a whole chain of people involved. So that's, I think, the most important thing, that we all continue to understand the role that we have and we support each other and really understand the chain. Because I think if people didn't understand the chain, kind of a year ago, they very much do understand it now. Secondly, I guess we need to continue to inspire confidence in hospitality. Hospitality's done a great job, and the statistics and the information that's been published, show that hospitality has done a very good job. Certainly the good places, and anyone listening to this probably goes to a good pub that is probably quite responsible and ethical in its nature and approach. And those pubs have done a phenomenal job about trying to keep people safe. So I guess it will be important to continue to do that as much as anything, to just continue to inspire confidence. And then I guess the third thing is, you're probably going to, hopefully, I guess as a local brewer, independent brewer, I hope that, a lot of the pubs kind of recognize the value of local suppliers as well, because I think that can be a point of differentiation. when we started our business back in 2010, it was just kind of during the recession, the financial crisis. And one of the things I always said about that was I felt that kind of made people kind of more interested in supporting local, because they when you're in a difficult time in terms of a recession economically, you probably do want to try and support those within your community. And so let's hope that, from my point of view anyway, I hope that that's the way that people look. They want to support those breweries in their local community, and probably they have very good relationships with them. They know the owners know the owners of the pubs, and so they have that very direct connection, which you might not have with a larger brewery, where you would just maybe know the sales rep, the telesales person. So and that allows the groups to work together more, because you understand each other more. We know the pub, we know those pubs which have been struggling, which need a bit of help. So many breweries, particularly local breweries, have during the pandemic said, look, we'll replace the beer that's gone out of date. And again, that's a really good way that the pubs and breweries work together. I think the pubs appreciated it, and I think those pubs will appreciate that, because when they open, they will make sure that they give sufficient business, and they appreciate it. So I think that the overriding theme is that the supply chain, we all continue to work together, understand each other's problems, and are just understanding of each other.
And I haven't mentioned how important is your presence in Tottenham, in the north of London. You are definitely a brewery for the local community, as much as you are for all the good beer drinkers around the world and around London. But especially there, your role there is very remarkable. When you putting people together, and I'm sure there are many people right now which are suffering to don't see friends, regulars, bartenders, their own pubs just outside the window, right?
Yeah. We've been in Tottenham, in Northumberland Park, which is kind of a fairly deprived area, even within Tottenham as well. And so, just being there, I think, has been quite good. I think people have respected the fact that when we moved there were no breweries in Tottenham. And Tottenham, was the place where, well, why'd you go to Tottenham? Because we didn't sell any beer to any Tottenham pubs for the first 2 years, I think.
Wow.
And now it's changed. There's a lot more pubs in Tottenham now who buy our beer. We've always made a big deal about it, because again, I think one of the important things about a brewery is that community and that place, and that's the one thing where we can try and differentiate ourselves from some of the bigger kind of macro breweries, and by being that presence in the community, I think it creates what you want. We want people locally to enjoy our beers. I always think it's a bit almost like people treat their local brewery sometimes like their football team. Even if the football team's not playing great, they kind of still support. They feel an attachment to it, and I think people certainly get that way with breweries in their communities.
Every time I've been somewhere else and I found your beers or beers made in North London, not far from where I'm based, I was silly enough to say, hey, look at that, I can find a beer from not far from where I live. This is my beer, I want to have a pint of it. So how beautiful is to have a brewery just right to the corner of your house, and then be able to consume it just in your local. Right. I'm started crying slowly, because this is very emotional. I do have goosebumps and everything. There is a question which I'm trying to keep for the end, because it almost like wrapping up the conversation with every guest, and it's like, what is the future of our industry? And I'm adding one more word on it. Should we stay positive, and should we believe the worst is behind us? How do you feel about it?
I certainly, we're certainly trying to stay positive and optimistic. So I think we have to be positive. There is that one school of thought, of course, that says that once restrictions are eased, we'll go back to a 1920s style jazz era, I think they called it, where there's this pent up consumption and people are desperate to go out. And And I'm not sure it will be quite to that degree, but hopefully there will be people will want to go and get, go and see their friends again. Well, one interesting thing I always find, particularly in London, is that the first couple of weeks in January, usually January is a terrible month for pubs and for breweries, but we always found the first couple of weeks were quite good because a lot of people in London obviously depart London during Christmas and New Year and go home back to their families, and then they come back. And of course, they're back in London in early January and they're seeing their friends. And so they're going out to the pub. So I'm hoping that people who have not seen friends, people that have left London for a while, who are now coming back, will want to go out. And they'll and hospitality will have done a great job, giving people confidence that it's safe to go back there. And that, I think, gives us a great deal of optimism. The difficulty, I think, is going to be for some of those real city centre locations where if staff aren't going into the office, then that culture of kind of post-work drinking where people go out together from the workplace to one of the local pubs in the city, that could be difficult for some of those pubs. What we had found again after lockdown was that because a lot of people were still working from home, some of the neighbourhood pubs were trading quite well, because rather than people being out in the office, they were going out after their day at home and going to their local neighbourhood pub. So that may be something that we see, particularly as, from what I read, there's maybe going to be a bit of a lag between some people going back to the office if they return at all. So that's where there's a little bit of a concern. But there's been plenty of exceptions to that rule. I know some of the pubs were doing reasonably well in central London. So hopefully that will still be the case. I think we've got to be optimistic, because really we need to look for something positive. We've all, everyone in our industry has had a very, very difficult time, and it's crucial that we try and bounce back from this. And in history, you get cycles, don't you? When I remember again back in 2010 when we started a brewery, people say, "Why are you starting a brewery? All the pubs are closing." And of course, after the smoking ban, everyone assumed all the pubs would close after that, and no one would want to go to a pub. So pubs are resilient businesses, often run by resilient people, often with people working in them that are really dedicated to what they do. And it's probably pubs and people in pubs are probably generally very underappreciated in the grand scheme of things. And I think, pubs will bounce back. And, maybe there'll be different models, but, let's just hope that particularly the independent sector will really be able to continue to follow the trend that had been happening over the last 10 years. A lot of great pubs really doing very, very well, and stocking such a great range of beers. I mean, we've never had it, up until the pandemic, we'd never had it so good in London for being able to drink, Used to be people would go to the beer festivals. Remember the London Drinker Beer Festival at the Camden Centre. And actually, as time went on, it maybe kind of got less busy. And part of the reason was there was so much good beer available in all of the pubs in London. Beer festivals became less important because you could get great beer on any night of the week if you chose the right place to go to.
It's great to hear so much positivity and so much desire to see this industry thrive from someone that have seen a couple of phases. But probably that's the secret, because you saw few like mutations and differentiations. That's why you can keep the fire on, and this is lovely. And you'll be happy to know then on a Sunday morning of 5 or 6 years ago, Dominic showed me and my at that time girlfriend, now wife, the brewery, and I do have photos as well of it.
That was the old. Was that the old brewery as well? Great.
I'm gonna share with you very soon one day, and again, I don't even have to say this is my culture. This is my this is the place where I found home. Far from what used to be home. So I have nothing but just desire to see this sector thrive, and knowing that there are people like you and all the other good people that you mentioned, it's just perfect. It's just what we're looking for. And you've seen a lot of comments, and there is appetite of this type of conversations. That's why we're doing them. And I promise, as I'm saying every night, to don't go too far from the 40 minutes of chat. Yes. So if people want to hear more from you, you can come again, or they're gonna hear from you at the next digital event you're gonna do. And Andy, I couldn't ask for better chat than the one that I had tonight with you.
Thanks, Gabs. Thank you very much. Really appreciate the opportunity to chat with you and everybody.
I definitely want to make sure I come to see you whatever is going to be possible, because it's just 3 stops away of Victoria Line from where I am.
You're welcome anytime. We'll pick you up at the tube.
Yeah, I love it. And I would like to thank everyone for the overwhelming presence, so many comments and so many views. This is brilliant. And good beer is with you. Good beer will be with you. And it's just a matter of time and making sure, the time are going to be ready for what we're looking for. So, Andy, thank you again. Have a lovely evening.
Cheers.
And
thanks, Gab.
Guys, have a lovely evening as well. Enjoy your beers, enjoy your food, enjoy your time. Take care. Bye-bye. See you next week.